Hi there, in this video we are going to go over how to factor linear expressions. So our I can statement for today is I can factor linear expressions. Alright, to factor a number means to write it as a product of its factors. All right, so what does that mean? That means, well, first you should know what a factor is, right? A factor is what number times another number will get that number. All right, so in other words, if we look here at our first example where it says find the GCF of 4x and 12x, it's asking you for the greatest common factor. So what is a factor that goes with both of those? So what's the biggest number that can be divided into 4 and 12? So the biggest number that you can divide 4 and 12 by is 4. And then you'll notice that both of them have an x. So the GCF here is 4x, the greatest common factor, right? That's what GCF stands for. Both of those numbers can be divided by 4 and divided by x. Over here it says find the GCF of 18a and 20ab. So what is the biggest number that goes into both 18 and 20? That is 2. And then you'll notice that there is an a in both of these. So it would be 2a. B is not in both of these. It's only here. So we don't include B as our GCF. All right, when an expression is broken down into a product of its factors, it's referred to as being in factored form. So here in these examples, we are going to factor each expression using the GCF. And if the expression can be factored, we will write cannot be factored. So here we've got two terms, 8x and 4y. So the way I want you to set up every factoring problem is, in this case, right, we have two terms. So we have two blanks inside of our parentheses and one outside. The one outside is going to be where our GCF goes. So what's the biggest number that goes into 8 and 4? 4, right? 4 is the biggest number that you can divide 8 and 4 by. So now I want you to ask yourself, okay, 4 times what number will get you 8x? 4 times 2x. You could also look at it like, all right, 8x divided by 4 gets you 2x. Right? Let's look at how to find our next term. We have 4 times what number will get us positive 4y, right? We look at it as a term, positive 4y. So 4 times what number gets you 4y? 4 times a positive 1y will get you positive 4y's. So in other words, if you factored this correctly, which in this case we did, 2x plus y, if you factored this correctly, if you were to use a distributive property back, 4 times 2x gets you 8x, 4 times y gets you a positive 4y. You should get the expression that you had started with. All right, so the whole point of this is to come up with an equivalent expression, and that's what we did. We came up with an equivalent expression after factoring the GCF. All right, so here we start with two terms. So we're going to start with two blanks inside the parentheses and one outside for our GCF. What's the greatest common factor between 3x and 12? Okay, well, the biggest number that goes into both 3 and 12 that you can divide both of those numbers by is 3. 3 times what is going to get you 3x? Well, 3 times x will get you 3x, right? All right, let's think of the next one. 3 times what is going to get me this positive 12? 3 times a positive 4 will get me positive 12. So your answer for this is going to be 3 parentheses x plus 4. And if you double check, right, if you use a distributive property, 3 times x gets you 3x. 3 times 4 does get you positive 12. So if you go back and use a distributive property, you do in fact get what you started with. So a lot of times you can consider like factoring like almost like a backwards distributive property. All All right, so our next example, we've got 12x plus 7. Well, what is the greatest common factor between 12x and 7? There, in fact, is none other than 1. So you don't need to factor out the 1. We can just write here, cannot be factored. All right, next we have 4x plus 28y plus 16. The greatest common factor between these three terms is 4. Since this has 3 terms in our original expression, in our parentheses, then I also put 3 terms. And we said our GCF is 4. All right, so 4 times what number will get me 4x? 4 times x. 4 times what number will get me positive 28y? Right, 4 times 7, positive 7. 4 times what number will get me positive 16? Sorry, I should have said positive 7y, right? 4 times positive 7y will get me positive 28y. All right, so 4 times what is going to get me positive 16? 4 times a positive 4 will get me positive 16. So our answer for this would be 4 parentheses x plus 7y plus 4. All right, so in our next examples, we have factor x expression using the GCF and the negative GCF. If the expression cannot be factored, then right cannot be factored. All right, so we're going to factor this 2 ways using the GCF and the negative GCF. So let's start our GCF how we would normally, right? So this outside term is GCF. The greatest common factor between 2, 18, and 14 is 2. And now we can ask ourselves, 2 times what number gets you negative 2x? When you have a lot of positives and negatives that you have to determine that, I think it's easier maybe to think about, okay, well, this term divided by the GCF of 2, negative 2x divided by 2 gets you a negative 1x. Just like 2 times negative x gets you that negative 2x, right? I think it's easier to see it with the division when you have a lot of positives and negatives that you're working with. So like for this term, 18y divided by 2 gets you a positive 9y. And then we have here positive 14 divided by 2 gets you positive 7. So your answer for this, for the GCF, would be 2 parentheses negative x plus 9y plus 7. That's with the GCF. With our negative GCF, right, our negative GCF, this would be negative 2. And then we're going to write 3 blanks inside. So we're going to do the same thing, but using the negative GCF. So we've got here negative 2x divided by negative 2 gets you a positive 1x. You don't have to write the 1, you can just write x. Then we have 18y's divided by negative 2 gets you negative 9y's. And then you have positive 14 divided by negative 2 will get you negative 7. So your second expression after factoring out the negative GCF would be negative 2, x minus 9y minus 7.
Ms. Murray or Mr. Casio,
All right, so here's our next example. We're going to start off with the GCF and then our 3 terms. So the greatest common factor between negative 15, negative 30, and negative 12. The biggest number that goes into all 3 of those is 3. All right, and now ask yourselves, negative 15x divided by 3 gets you negative 5x. Negative 30y divided by 3 gets you negative 10y. And negative 12 divided by 3 gets you negative 4. We're going to do the same thing now, but using the negative GCF, which is negative 3. All right, 3 blanks in our parentheses. Negative 15x divided by negative 3 gets you a positive 5x. Negative 30y divided by negative 3 gets you a positive 10y. And then negative 12 divided by negative 3 gets you a positive 4. So those are our 2 answers for this next example. All right, for our next example, we're going to start with our GCF again, and we have 3 terms inside the parentheses. So the greatest common factor between negative 4, negative 14, and negative 10, so the biggest number that you can divide all 3 of those by, is in fact 2. So now we're going to do negative 4x divided by 2 is negative 2x. Negative 14y divided by 2 gets you negative 7y. Negative 10 divided by 2 gets you negative 5. We're going to do the same thing with our negative GCF, which would be negative 2. All right, so negative 4x divided by negative 2 is positive 2x. Negative 14y divided by negative 2 is positive 7y. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is positive 5. All right, and now we're going to do the same thing for the last example. We're going to start off with our GCF here. The GCF, or the greatest common factor between negative 2 and 8, the biggest number that you can divide both of those numbers by, is 2. All right, and now we have negative 2x divided by 2 gets you negative x, or negative 1x, but you don't need to write the 1. And then we have 8 divided by 2, which gets you positive 4. We're going to do the same thing here with our negative GCF. So the negative GCF would be negative 2. Negative 2x divided by negative 2 gets you positive 1x. 8 divided by negative 2 gets you negative 4. All right, and now we have this example here. What are possible dimensions of the rectangular area at the right? So here we're given this rectangle, and we're given the area is 28x minus 4. You should know that the area formula is equal to length times width, right? So in other words, we would take our length and we would take our width and we would multiply them, and we get this expression 28x minus 14. So in order to figure out what your 2 side lengths would be, we would need to factor out a few numbers here. It says, what are the possible dimensions? It doesn't tell you list them all, but we are going to list as many as we can here. I'm going to start with the GCF. So between 28x and negative 14, the GCF, the biggest number that goes into both of those that you can divide both of those numbers by, is 14. So we're going to start first with our GCF and then the 2 numbers inside. So we're going to start 14. 14, so 28x divided by 14 gets you 2x. All right, and then negative 14 divided by 14 gets you negative 1. So in other words, one possible length would be 14, and one possible width would be 2x minus 1. That's one possible answer, and you can obviously flip-flop the length and the width too. If you were to multiply this back, right, 14 and 2x minus 1. If you were to multiply this back, 14 times 2x gets you 28x. 14 times negative 1 does in fact get you negative 14. So these two you can multiply to get it back to the area. All right, so that is one answer, one possible answer. Let's go through a couple of other different ones. You can factor this out using, instead of the GCF, you can factor it out using another number, right? What other factors go into both 28 and 14? 7. So you could factor out using 7. So 28x divided by 7, right, will get you 4x. Negative 14 divided by 7 gets you negative 2. So you could say your length is 7 and your width is 4x minus 2. All right, another set of numbers, or another factor that we could use to factor out both this 28x and the negative 14 is 2. Right, so 28x divided by 2 will get you 14x. Negative 14 divided by 2 will get you negative 7. So you could say your length is 2 and your width is 14x minus 7. All right, and then one more that might seem obvious, but people forget about it, is you could have a 1, and then it would just be 28x minus 14. So your length would be 1, and then your width would be 28x minus 14. All right, so any of these answer choices would possibly work for this question, and you could flip-flop the length and the width. All right, so that's all. Hopefully you learned how to factor linear expressions. Thank you for watching.